Battletoads is a beat-em-up game. Battletoads is a platform beat-em-up game. A platform beat-em-up strategy racing. Battletoads Battletoads is a game that we produced featuring 3 characters, which were toads, called Rash, Zitz and Pimple. We wanted a set of characters that we could produce huge merchandise for. I remember the Batman film had just hit the movies, and we were looking at all of the different merchandising that you could buy for the film and for the character, and we wanted something like that. The t-shirts, the plastic models, the bedspreads, everything.
At the time with Battletoads, I can remember Tim being very impressed by the Ninja Turtles. So it was meant to be a sort of tongue-in-cheek version, or at least I thought it was meant to be a tongue-in-cheek version of the Turtles.
So it's kind of a typical example of Rare's looking at what was popular and then kind of putting our spin on it, kind of amping it up, making it a bit more edgy, a bit more kind of violent.
We went through all kinds of ideas and names. I think I was going to call them the Amphibians at one time, but we ended up with Battletoads and that worked. I wanted it to look kind of Disney-like, but I wasn't anywhere near a good enough artist for that, so we came up with a few different gimmicks, and we had the hands expanding and the foot turning into a huge boot. I think the ability to be able to transform limbs rather than carry actual weapons around, that's what made them unique. I think if you picked up the original NES version of Battletoads now, I think you get a bit of a shock, because it was a very precise, very difficult game to play.
Back then they were kind of quite short games, so one way of getting more kind of playability was to provide the player with a decent level of challenge. Mark, who was leading the software effort, was like a really talented player, so he'd set the general difficulty level around what he was good at.
He made it so difficult, and you had to be precise to the 100th of the second when to press the button on the controller.
At the time we were avid game players, and it got to the point where I could do the turbo tunnel without losing a life. We even tried to do the last section with the really fast walls with our eyes closed, and we got really close to finishing it, but no one could ever do it. The reviews were quite complimentary on kind of not only how challenging it was, everyone liked it, but I think the variety of the levels was the key to how well it was received. Like on one level it would be sideways scrolling doing one thing, the next level you'd be on a rope going down a thing, then you'd be on a tunnel, then you'd be on some kind of like weird device, then you'd be on the back of a snake. It like jumped around all over the place. It was such a breath of fresh air in terms of the breadth of gameplay in it.
In the arcade version of Battletoads, we were able to be even more over the top with the violence, the comedy violence, than the NES, because there was obviously certain restrictions on what we could produce for a console. So we went as pretty much extreme as we could be, and I think that was to the benefit of the product.
It took a long time to produce because it was all a new kind of game for us, but it was a fun one to work with.
It was like building a car, and you start with no parts. You've got to just start manufacturing each of the parts and then putting them together.
Chris Stamper started working on a board. He actually made the arcade board himself.
Meanwhile, we had to write all the software. Well, I had to write all the software from scratch, so all the audio drivers, all the audio software, all the graphics software. There'd be points where we'd tweak it and we'd say, the hardware is not fast enough here, we need to make some changes. And then he'd add that in, and then we'd change the software again. So there was really quite a bit of collaboration.
Working on the arcade one was a great experience, and taught me a lot about a very different type of design, which wasn't all about let's try and keep the player playing for hours. It's literally, let's get the player on the machine, let's take some money off them, let's kill them off as quick as possible, but let's make sure they've had a good enough time so they want to put more money in.
At the end of Battletoads Arcade, we had a boss called Robomanus that you tried to beat, and we were having trouble balancing the game, so it felt like you could beat him if you were on your own when you weren't that good, versus if there was 3 players coming in and really hitting him.
We hit upon this idea of making him super tough at the start, even to the point where you couldn't actually do any damage to him.
For the first 45 seconds, nothing you did actually affected him in any way, but it looked like it did.
It's probably the best idea I've ever had in the industry. It's like, how can we make the final boss take more money? I know. Let's make it so he can't kill him.
There was a few games that we did that actually had a crossover element to them. I think one of the ones, which was a rather odd one, was Battletoads Double Dragon.
I'm guessing it came from the Trade West link, because Trade West were licensees for both Battletoads and Double Dragon.
It just seemed a bit nuts to have these cartoon characters with expanding hands that turn into fists and drills, mixed up with these martial arts dudes from an arcade machine.
Being as the Toads were our characters and Billy and Jimmy weren't, we were pondering whether to make the Toads have better moves and be slightly stronger, so they'd always have this like slight advantage. But in the end, we did the right thing, and it was all fairly balanced.
From Battletoads, I think we were going to try and do a spin-off game called Warhogs with the character called Captain Pork. I think that was Tim's design. I can remember drawing these two characters that were like big, chunky warhog bikers, and they were going to shout pork swords every time they went into battle, but we didn't do it eventually. Battletoads ran over several different consoles. I think we had a Game Boy version, a Super NES version, an NES version, an arcade machine. We had a cartoon, so it's had a pretty good run of it, but I think it'd be quite a nice one to be revived. I'd always love to see a new Battletoads game out there. Maybe we'll make one.